continue with our discussion of Sefer Bereshit. Now we are in chapter 19 of Sefer Bereshit, and the two messengers, the people sometimes translate as angels, arrive at Sodom in the evening. Lot sits at the gate. Why is he at the gate? It is common to see the judges at the gate, and the Midrash comments that. And indeed, afterwards, the people tell him, "You're just a sojourner. Why do you think that you should be the judge in the city?" So maybe Lot was a knowledgeable person, and he was elevated to this position of a judge. So Lot sees them, and he rises and he says, "Please come and sleep in my house. I will take care of you." And they say, "No, we will sleep in the street." And he insists, and he brings them home. And we see later on that the people surround the house. They want them to. They want Lot to hand the visitors to them. And from what we read last week in the book of Yehezkel, we understand that Sodom was inhospitable. They were really hostile towards visitors. So this dialogue between Lot and the messenger is interesting because he wants to show hospitality, to practice hospitality, even though it is not the common practice in Sodom. And they refuse. They say, "We will sleep in the street." And he almost knows that this is a sort of a death sentence for them. And he eventually brings them home. And the visitors police, there's a neighborhood watch in Sodom. God forbid they don't let any visitors come into the city. So it says, "Terem yishkavu, ve'anshei ha'ir anshei Sodom nasabu al habayit minar ve'ad zaken kol ha'am mikatzeh." The men of the city surrounded the house, the young and the old. ויקראו אל לוט ויאמרו לו, היה אנשים אשר באו אליך הלילה, הוציאם אלינו ונגרע אותם. They called unto Lot and said unto him, "Where are the men that came in to thee this night? Bring them out unto us that we may know them." So we understand to know in the in the sexual sense, and therefore people interpret the story of sodomy as a homosexuality and say that that's what they're saying. But it's obvious from the story that this is not what they wanted. That their purpose was not sexual pleasure, because if that was the case, he would not offer instead of the visitors his two daughters, which is in itself a horrible thought. But it's not about their lust for men. This is not what directed them. And the word leyadea appears again in Tanakh in the sense of torture in the story of Gideon, when Gideon chases the kings of Midian in the book of Shoftim. I'm going to go there 1 second. So Gideon, the judge, he's the one who fought with the tribes of Midian, the Zevach v'Tzalmunah, Ze'ev v'Orev, and when he fought against them and he chased them, he had to pass through the city here. The prophet comes to Gideon and he said, "Go and fight with Midian," but he was relatively from an unknown tribe. So when Gideon chases the people of Midian, is in this chapter, it was the following one. After he attacked the camp, this is in chapter 8 then. He comes to the city of Sukkot and he says to the men of Sukkot, give me bread, food, because I'm chasing Zevach v'Tzalmunah, the kings of Midian. And the princes of Sukkot said, "Are the hands of Zevach and Tzalmunah now in your power, that we should give bread unto you?" Meaning they say, "Well, you didn't win yet. They're going to defeat you, and then they're going to come and punish us, so we cannot help you." Meaning that they chose to stood aside and not help him. Vayomer Gideon, Lechen betet Adonai et Zevach v'Tzalmunah beyadi. Gideon said, "When Hashem delivers them in my hand, I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with the briars." So he does that, and he goes back to Sukkot, right? And here's, look at verse 16. This is a rare usage of this verb in Tanakh. And he comes to the people of Sukkot. He says, remember that you told me I did not capture Yad Zevach et Salmunah. Now I have them. So now I'm going to punish you. It says, ויקח את זקני העיר, ואת קוצי המדבר ואת הברקנים. He took the elders and he took the thorns and the briars. ויודע בהם את אנשי סוכות. And he made them know the pain of those of the people of Sukkot, right? They translated, and with them he taught the men of Sukkot, but literally says vayoda from the word lada'at. So I think that when then in Sodom it's the same thing. When they say the purpose of the people of Sodom was to embarrass those people, to cause them pain, physical, maybe, and definitely emotional pain, in a way that they will never want to come back again. And this also reminds me of the story of David sending messengers to the king of Ammon, and instead of accepting them with peace, he shaves half their beards vertically, so now they're embarrassed to be outside. So I think that is what Anshe don't want to do. And Lot says, no, don't do that. Instead, if you want to satisfy your lust, instead of just punishing my guests, I'm going to give you my daughters. Now that's a horrible thing to do. Instead of protecting his guests, he should not have handed in his guests, obviously, but he should not sacrifice his daughters when we don't hear that his daughters have a say. He doesn't ask them, are you willing to sacrifice your lives to save my guests? Just say, oh, I have 2 daughters, just go ahead and take them. And I think this really reflects probably the society of the time, where women are just the possession of the men, the daughters, his wife. It's also reminiscent of the story of Pilegesh Bagivah, the concubine, at the end of the book of Judges, which ends in, tragically, a man who was delayed in the house of his father-in-law and then stayed over in the city of Giv'ah, the hill of Binyamin. And it's a very similar story that people surround the house and they want him, and he just pushes his concubine outside. Over there, he doesn't care about her at all. And he goes back to sleep. And in the morning, he finds her lying at the door, says, get up, we're leaving. Just really, I wouldn't even attempt to try to understand that story. If any of you, if you know that story that I'm referring to at the end of the book of Judges, and you have a good explanation for it, I'd be glad to hear it. I have no understanding. Other than that the Navi wants to show us the extent of cruelty that people were capable of. I do not understand that story. It's a horrific story. Here with the people of Sodom, I think that was their intention. The intention was to insult and embarrass the visitors and to send a message to future visitors: do not dare come through the gates of Sodom. So Lot tries to talk to them, and what is their answer? ויאמרו גש הלאה, ויאמרו אחד בא לגור וישפוט שפוט, עתה נרע לך מהם. So they say, stand back, and it says, you just came to as a sojourner, and now you became the judge, which supports the argument of Lot becoming the judge in Sodom, sitting at the gate of the city. Maybe when he came, he still had the values of Abraham, but then they quickly deteriorated, and they're not willing to accept his morals and ethics.
Question, Rabbi.
Yes.
When you were talking about Judges, you were saying towards the end of the book?
Yes.
So like on chapter 21, like chapter 20, chapter 19?
It's chapter 20. Yeah. He started chapter 19 here.
Okay.
They come, he stays with his father-in-law, and then he travels, and he's afraid to stay. There's interesting statement here in verse 11. In 1911, they pass by the city of Yevus, and which is a foreign city, non-Jewish city, and his lad says, the servant, let's go and sleep over at the city of Yavuz. And he says, no, we're not going to sleep in the city of non-Jews. Let's go to the city of Giv'ah. So that's the irony. They avoided a non-Jewish city, but where disaster befell them is in the Jewish city of Giv'ah. And then maybe because he was from Ephraim and they were Binyamin, it's like the same thing. ויאמרו אל האיש בעל הבית הזקן לאמור, רוצה את האיש אשר בא אל ביתך ונדענו, bring him out and we may know him. Same thing. It's like the idea of that we don't want foreigners in our city. And the man says, I'm going to give you my daughter, who's a virgin, and his concubine. Take them and don't harm that man. And they wouldn't listen to him. So he just pushed this woman outside. And the man just, in verse 26, Vayakom Adonai baboker, her master rose up in the morning and it's like, get up, we need to go. And she's not answering. So this is really one of the most horrific stories in the Tanakh, gang rape and apathy and all that. So, but we're not dealing with judges now, thank God.
Right. Okay. Thank
you. We'll when we get there, we'll have to grapple with that. Here, I want to highlight one more thing. So there's a miracle here. The messengers, the people bring Lot home and they blind the people at the door, and then they tell Lot in verse 12, "Vayamru anashim el Lot." This is the family of Lot that we sort of forgot. Mi lecha po hatan ubanecha ubnotecha. Do you have a son-in-law, sons, daughters, anyone you have in the city? Please take them out. So in verse 14. Lot goes out and he speaks to his sons-in-law who married his daughters, and he says, get up and leave because Hashem is going to destroy the city. But it seemed unto his sons-in-law as one that jested. I mean, they think that he's mocking them. And here we come again to the theme of communication. What is happening between them? What does it mean that they think he mocks them? And how did Lot receive that response from his sons-in-law? I think that's my theory. And as always, you're always free to disagree. Just offering an interpretation. I think that we read that segment here. I mean, the Torah could have said, Vayakom Lot vayetze min ha'ir. We don't even have to know that this part of his family was left behind. And Lot does not try to insist, or maybe he gives up on them. What happens there? I think that when Lot comes to his sons-in-law and says, get up and leave because God is destroying the city because of their iniquity, they look at him and they say this, being part of the Sodom society, which is extremely selfish, right? They're the epitome of selfishness, right? To each his own. They look at him and say, why would you come to tell us that? In our society, no one cares about the other. Yes, this woman used to be your daughter, but you don't care about your daughters, right? And we know that they're right, actually, because a minute ago, he was willing to sacrifice his daughter to save his visitors, right? So they say, you don't care about your daughters. So why do you want to tell us to leave the city? Probably, yeah, right. You have an ulterior motive. What is it? Maybe you want to take our possessions. Maybe you're trying to trick us. You're mocking us. And Lot, at that moment, is in utter shock because now he understands what Sodom has done to his family. He enjoyed that culture of selfishness for a while because it was, everyone was protected and he was well-to-do. But when the time comes that there is a disaster and you need to support one another, if you don't have it, everything falls apart. There was in the 60s or 70s, a so-called philosopher in Israel. It was an academic. I think, if I'm not wrong, his name was Moshe Kron, who really developed an ideology based on, so you could say, the Sodom model, right? he said that to have a perfectly functioning society, you have to have members who care for one another. So he developed it was a very small society, you could call it like a cult, where everybody signed up to help one another with total devotion, but only to those who were part of the sect, and no people were outside it. And his idea was that this way they could be autosufficient and totally independent. Um, the end was that I think I don't remember the details, but I think he collapsed with the heart failure on a street, and there was nobody there to help him. So sort of like a fitting end to what he chose for himself, because we can't rely on just assigning certain people to help us. We have to be always committed to everyone around us and everyone that we can reach out to. So anyway, I think this is what I read in the story of Sodom, of Lot, talking, because if you try to visualize that, it's a very dramatic moment. You know, the angels or the messengers are waiting, they're about to destroy the city, right? It's like, you know, all the movies where they have a couple of minutes to run out before something explodes or everything. And Lot is on the door. He says, come, we have to leave. Disaster is imminent. He says, are you kidding? Nobody cares. Nobody cares about one another. Go to sleep. What are you trying to do? And he says, no, disaster. Oh, come on. And there's really drama there. But it all stems from that culture of Sodom. Yes, Shana.
So I'm still back a little bit on the daughters of Lot. I like that you can translate that nida as different than that. But if you don't translate it in the traditional way, how do we get the reasoning of why he's offering his daughters? Also in Judges, they offered the woman, if they're wanting to be inhospitable, how does that help?
Because they punish anyone who's a visitor or who hosts visitors. You like, this is the message that you don't dare do it again.
So he wants to pacify them by offering his daughters? Why did he offer his
Maybe
daughters?
he sees it. Yeah. You want to embarrass me? You want to punish my family? Okay, punish them. Don't punish them. Punish my daughters. Don't punish my visitors. And it's I think also shows us a completely distorted code of moral that that, you know, in Judaism, the idea of human life is so essential from the very beginning of the Torah. And Hachamim later on took it to say, you could never serve your life by killing another person. And they said it, they phrase it as my hazit de damat didach sumak tefei. Your blood is not rather than that of another person. So the Torah also says several times, "Velo tikach kofer lenefesh rotzeach." You cannot take ransom for the life of a murderer. In chapter 9 in Bereshit, after the flood, God tells Noah, right? We read it, "Shofech dam ha'adam, ba'adam damo yishafech." He who sheds the blood of man by man, his blood will. All these psukim speak about that. Professor Moshe Greenberg, in his commentary on good and evil in Jewish thought, explains that in ancient times and other societies other than Jewish society, than Torah society, life had a price tag. Life had a value, and let's say in a small village, if a murder was committed, the people of the village would say, after judging the perpetrator, they would say, okay, if we kill him now, we are going to lose another person, right? I like an example. If the carpenter killed the blacksmith, right? And the people of the village, okay, say now the carpenter is a murderer, we're going to kill him. And so someone says, hey, now we're not going to have a blacksmith and a carpenter, right? So they tell the carpenter, okay, pay us back with some community work, and we'll let you off the hook. The Torah says, no, that doesn't work, because human life does not have a value. It doesn't matter if he's a janitor or the president or nuclear physicist. They all have the same value. But here, Lot and the person in the Giv'ah are doing the exact opposite. They say the lives of the women don't matter, and we could give them as an exchange for the lives of our visitors who are under our wing. Sort of like there's a covenant between me and my visitors. What about the covenant between your children or any other human being? So I think that all these stories come to show us the horrible distortion of the moral system, value system. And what do you mean by? I saw this comment. Someone saying this sarcastic. In what sense? Sarcastic. Lot's comment.
Look at Patrick's.
Yeah, I didn't read his. Yeah. Yeah, but when was he making a sarcastic remark? When he said, "Take my daughters"?
As a sarcastic remark, as opposed to.
Could be, but from what we see in the story of Judges, sheds light on this story to show that this was really something that people were capable of doing. So we don't know. Anyway, Lot flees the city. There, and he can't go yet. He's like in verse 16, Vayitmahmah, he lingered, and that's where we find in the Ta'amim of the Mikra a very rare term called shalshelet that looks like three bigger than signs on top of, right, like two Z's on top of the word Vayitmahmah. And in the Sephardic trope, we read it like Vayitmahmah, and a pasek at the end. And I think in Ashkenazi trope is Vayitmahmah, a little more operatic, but but the idea is that of confusion and like not knowing what to do. He doesn't know what to do. He delays. He lingers because now he's torn between saving himself and leaving his children behind. This is a classic drama that that you find here in several sentences in the Torah. So they take him and they put him outside the city, and they tell him, run away, don't look back, run to the mountain, lest you will be swept away. And he says, please, I can't make it to the mountain. Let me go to the city, and I'll survive. And that's sort of, again, something that's ignored. Not until I was, I don't know, in my 20s, and I'm reading this, and I say, wait a second. So we always speak about the 5 cities of the Jordan Valley that were destroyed, but one of them, Tzor, was spared. But does it mean that later on it was destroyed? We're not clear on that, because Tzor was one of the 5 cities. So anyway, he runs away, and here in verse 24 it says, "V'Adonai mitir al Sodom v'al Amorah gofrit va'esh met Adonai min hashamayim." Hashem brought upon Sodom and Amorah brimstone and fire. That's where we get the preacher who speak, with fire and brimstone. It's from Sodom v'Amorah. "Vayafach et ha'arim ha'el v'et kol ha'kikar v'et kol yoshvei ha'arim v'tzemach ha'adama." And Hashem overthrew the cities and the plain, the citizens of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground. Now, his wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Abraham rises in the morning. I'll go back to the story in a second. Abraham rises in the morning, and he goes to the place where he spoke with Hashem, and he watches over Sodom v'Amorah and the whole land. Vayar v'nei ala kitor haaretz kekitor ha'kivshan, and he sees that the vapor comes from the ground like that of a furnace. It's a very great. Sorry? Oh, okay. I thought someone was asking something. So what is happening here is that, first of all, the destruction is referred to throughout the Tanakh as, always when we speak about a symbol of destruction, it's Sodom v'Amorah. And also the epitome of sin is Sodom v'Amorah. At the beginning of Yeshaya speak about the people of Sodom and Amorah. In the Parashat Nitzavim, when there's a threat of the curse that will come upon the land if they don't follow the words of Hashem. He says, you will be like Mapichat Sodom v'Amorah Adma u'Tzvoim, like those cities. But the concept of hafecha, of reversal, to me is interesting because it's sort of, remember that earlier when Lot was contemplating where to live, it says that he looked over the plain of the Jordan, right? And it was like Kegan Hashem, like the garden of God, Bo'acha Mitzrayim. So the garden of God is the Garden of Eden. So there's a reference here to the Garden of Eden. So I looked at this text to see, is there another reference to the garden, the Gan Eden? And I think there is, because after the destruction, it says, V'hinei ala kitor haaretz kitor hakivshan. The vapor came out from the land like the vapor of the furnace. And this is reminiscent of what happens in the early chapters of Bereshit, when it says a vapor would come, a mist would come from the land and water the land. So I think the reversal here is this. In Genesis, in creation, the land is created first, then it is separated from the water, then the plants, then humans come, and then they build cities. Here, everything is reversed. The cities are destroyed, and then humans, and then the plants, and then the earth itself. So it's mankind who brings destruction upon the land with their behavior. So I see here sort of a reversal. It's not just hafecha in the sense of destruction, but really a complete reversal of the order, and it's an upheaval of making everything stand upside down compared to Gan Eden. And then, okay, we'll conclude the story here with Lot and his daughters go up to the mountain, and they live in the cave. And here we have a very, very strange story. They think that that everybody's dead. So he was afraid to live in Zoar. Zoar is not destroyed, right? Like in the parasha that I quoted from Nitzavim, only 4 cities are mentioned. So it seems like Zoar survived. But the elder tells the younger, our father is old, and there's no one to come in unto us after the manner of the earth, meaning nobody to sleep with them or to marry them. So maybe they thought that really the whole world was destroyed, and only even the city of Zoar survived. They wouldn't be able to marry anyone of that city because their father became a pariah. The father was the one who was saved because he was different. He's already have this reputation. So they sleep with him, they get him drunk, they sleep with him. One becomes the one son of this incestuous relationship is the forefather of Moab. The other one is the forefather of Ammon until today. So I wonder if anyone has any thoughts about that story?
Yeah.
Yes, Yoel.
I think that it seems to me it has a lot to do with the earlier part where Lot offers them up to the others. So he offers them to be raped, and they rape him. The very wording is Hinei li shtei vanot asher lo yadu ish. So the word yadu, and here again the Torah says V'lo yada, he did v'lo yada b'shichva v'kuma. He did not know.
He didn't know, right?
And in both cases, they both have the people involved actually have some good motive, some semi-positive motivation, and yet their actions are all, indefensible.
Right. Very interesting. Thank you for that insight. Yeah. So it's sort of like Lot is being punished for his behavior, but and one distortion leads to another. And I think there's another thing that has to do with what I mentioned before about Gan Eden. I think that the story, even though it's a little late in the book of Bereshit to introduce that, I think that story is part of the just so myth category. Remember that in the beginning of Bereshit, I mentioned that it's not an official category. I called it that. After the Rudyard Kipling's, stories, or the Just So stories. You familiar with the stories? No, how did the elephant get a long trunk? Because he went and asked all the animals, "What do you eat?" And finally, he went to the crocodile, and the crocodile got his short, stubby trunk and kept pulling it till it get long. So these are the kind of stories that we like folktale or folklore that explain certain phenomena in nature. In ancient mythologies, you have the Rock of Andromeda in the Sea of Jaffa is believed to be, according to the Greek mythology, where Andromeda rose from the sea, or or things like that. For example, Lot's wife. If you ever looked for Lot's wife in the Judean desert near Yam HaMelech, you know that it depends with which tour guide you go. Because she keeps moving around. She was standing there for so long, she's not comfortable. She moves to the other side or whatever. Also, from an archaeological or geological point of view, the whatever happened in Sodom and Gomorrah happened long before Abraham was there. It's not within that range of 3,500 years. It's older. The earthquakes along this what's called the Syrian African fault line, and the saltiness of the city. It's hard to imagine that a period where this land was a fertile land. There was an attempt with the establishment of the state of Israel, and even before that, to settle near Yam HaMelech, and it wasn't successful. It seems like this whole story, I would say, this whole story is a symbolic, whole story of Lot. Remember that the word Lot in Hebrew means something which is covered, something which does not come to fruition, or something which is done in hiding. So it's the symbolism that element, dark element within us, that when taken to an extreme could really destroy us. But Sodom and Gomorrah were always, those, if there were cities there, they were not fertile. If they had economy, maybe they relied on the bitumen of the Dead Sea, as I mentioned last time. And the symbolism of Eshet Lot, Lot's wife, who becomes the pillar of salt, is that someone who becomes so embedded in this culture that she can't let go. So she looks back and she becomes part of that destruction of that being that pillar of salt. That's I think one way to see what's happening there. But I'm open to ideas, Shayna.
Well, I find the commentaries dissatisfying, I guess I would say, on the issue of Lot's wife, in the same way that we had in the story just before about Sarah and laughing. Because Abraham laughs, Sarah laughs, and then Sarah's punished for laughing. In this case, Lot eat mamea.
Right.
And then she looks back, and yet she's killed, and he's escorted out of the town. And everything I read was like how bad she was. She had to look back. Well, her daughters were there.
Right. Right. No, so good point. I didn't want to say that she's evil, but we're saying you get sucked into that culture, right? And being her daughters there, she left them behind, so she stays in that what she had to do probably. First of all, Lot delays before the admonition was given. They say, let's leave, and he's delayed, and they said, no, we have to go. And then when they go, they said, don't look back. What else could she have done, Lot's wife, right? What was her option? Her option was to leave Sodom earlier. That's the option, that you don't wait till the last minute, till disaster strikes. she liked it there, and he also is also to blame. They liked it there when everything was great and prosperous, but they didn't see what was happening to others. This is what Yehezkel said. "Alo ze haya avon Sodom ha'otech geon sivat lechem." She had this prosperity and success, and she didn't care about others. So I think that's what happens here between Lot and his wife and the view of Sodom. Eben, you wanna let's see. Eben sends our message. Yeah, so that's along the line when I say just so story. This is the approach of Professor Casuto to some of the stories of Bereshit. Menachem or Umberto Casuto in his commentary to Bereshit, when he dealt with the documentary hypothesis, especially regarding the flood, said that the story of the flood was well known to everyone, so it had to be included in the Torah. And probably like Eben says here, the story of the probably a cataclysmic earthquake in Sodom V'Amorah, which could have been, that 10,000 years earlier there were some villages there, and when that earthquake happened, the water of the sea turned salty, and then people couldn't live there anymore. And that story remained well known to people in the area, and that's why it's included in the Tanakh. Otherwise, people read there are certain stories that we got so used to that they have to become part of the official version. Otherwise, if they're not there, you say it's not true. Eduardo, did you wanted to say something before, or just okay? I thought you okay. So remember we spoke also before in the previous chapters about the encounter of the king of Sodom with Abraham after the war, the 4 kings against the 5 kings, and he fails to welcome him with. He doesn't bring him anything. It's Melchizedek Melech Shalem who brings bread and wine, and it is Sodom from where eventually come Ammon and Moab, the 2 nations that fail to welcome Am Yisrael with lechem and mayim. So I think that's also sort of a midrash midrash in the Torah that comes to tell us about the origins of Ammon and Moab. Ammon and Moab are 2 nations that were extremely inhospitable to Bnei Israel. They were hostile to them, even as a nation of slaves coming out of Egypt. They wouldn't welcome them belechem v'mayim. So this is really the behavior of Sodom. So it remained in Ammon and Moab, even though they were the descendants of Lot, who was a sojourner in Sodom. Let's see if this is the end of the chapter. Then the following chapter, which is chapter 20, Abraham travels to Gerar, and Avimelech takes his wife. Sort of a repetition of what happened with Paro. But before we go there, I wanted to see if anyone has still any comments or questions about the story of Sodom, because it's a loaded story, and maybe I sort of like skimmed over it. Any other comments, questions on that story? Yes, Susie.
I put in the chat that I think I heard once there something about Lot's wife being an act of voyeurism.
Oh, like she indulged in the disaster that happens to others.
Yeah.
Yeah, could be that could be one interpretation. That yeah. So again, the Sodom V'Amorah, I emphasize, they did not practice homosexuality. That's a misinterpretation of the text. This is not because if they did, they don't need the visitors, to do that. So it's a completely misunderstanding of the text. Hezkel says very clearly that the problem of Sodom V'Amorah was the lack of hospitality towards visitors. Okay, so let's go to the story of Avimelech and Abraham in Gerar and see how it's different from the story of Paro. So unlike Paro, Avimelech doesn't try to get near Sarah, and Vayomer lo, and Elohim tells Abraham, "Incha met al ha'isha asher lakachta v'hi be'ulat Baal." You are going to die because of the woman whom you have taken, and she's a married woman. Avimelech lo karav elai, he didn't get near her. He just took her. In verse 2, he just took her, put her in her harem. Vayomar Adonai hagoy gam tzadik ta'arog. Right, interesting, because he's echoing the words of Abraham in the previous chapter about Sodom. Are you going to kill the innocent with the righteous, with the wicked? So halo amar li achotihi ve'igami amra achihu betom levavi v'nikion kapai asiti zot. They said that they were brothers. So I was innocent, and look, he emphasizes tom levavi v'nikion kapai. Those are very those are titles, superlatives you don't take lightly. To have a wholesome heart and clean hands, someone who's really righteous and honest. So let's see so God says, yeah, I know that you were innocent, and that's why I prevented you from sinning, and that's why I didn't let you touch her. So I think if you want sarcasm here, I think God is a bit sarcastic, right? Because if you're an innocent man, you don't take the wife of a visitor who came into your town, right? Let them live. No, you take her right away, and then you say, oh, I didn't do anything. I say, yeah, that's why I didn't let you touch her. It's not your choice. And he says, return his wife. He should pray for you. And then Avimelech calls Abraham, and he says, you're a sinner. What have I sinned? What did I do to you that you brought such a sin upon us? You are the perpetrator. Look at verse 9. He says, you have done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And what does Abraham answer? Vayomer Abraham, and I leave verse 12 and 13 where he says about his sister from father for next week. I just want to focus on this pasuk. Vayomer Abraham, ki amarti rak en yirat Elohim b'makom hazeh v'haraguni al devar ishti. Abraham said, because I thought surely there's no fear of God or reverence of God in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. I see that as a crucial pasuk in Bereshit and in all of Tanakh. That statement of En yirat Elohim b'makom hazeh v'haraguni al devar ishti. Abraham says the lack of reverence for God could lead to murder. Right? We don't see it that way. Say someone is, oh, that person is Yireh Elohim. He's a righteous person, that or she's a righteous woman at the highest level, right? Of the ladder of the hierarchy of piety. But Avraham doesn't say that. He says, Rak en yirat Elohim, if there's no reverence of God, that could lead to murder. So what is yirat Elohim? What is that reverence of God? The reverence of God is the inhibitor. It's the deterrent of human society that prevents us from abusing power, from doing things when we think that no one is going to hold us accountable. And that's something that has been confirmed in recent decades, maybe even earlier, by psychologists, evolutionary psychologists, evolutionary biologists, asking the question of morality and religion. Why do we have religion? Where did this concept come from? It doesn't fit the theory of the survival of the fittest, because with the survival of the fittest, we constantly fight for resources, right? The survivor is the one who has more resources. So it makes sense that you don't waste your resources. But religion is wasteful. Religion is not calculated in keeping resources, right? It doesn't make sense in the, yeah, Susie?
But people don't succeed if they don't cooperate with each other.
Right. So it's true. It's a very good observation, but we cooperate with each other up to a certain level. There's a certain size of society where people could go under the radar and not cooperate and yet survive and succeed and thrive. The freeloaders, because they live off the mistakes or the naivete of others. Those are the Ponzi schemers and the tax fraud, and other or like I think the record belongs to a clerk in India who he got fired after they found out that he didn't show up to work but still collected his salary for 14 years. Yeah, I guess he lived in a city where many people had similar names, and he just kept collecting his salary for 14 years. But really, the idea of Yirat Elokim, when I said that the religion is wasteful, right, and does not really pay attention to resources, think about the real estate that some religions own, and the riches, art, jewelry, other artifacts that some churches and synagogues own, and even the sacrifices. How does it make sense in the evolutionary scheme when you think of surviving, eating the food that you need for survival, and then taking an animal, killing it, and burning it completely? Makes no sense, right? So the theory is that that creates all the rituals and religions create that sense of the reverence of God, the fear of a supreme power that sees what we do and can control us, punish or reward us. And Judaism to an extreme of God, who is not only a supreme power but also one who cares about justice. Avi Yetomim v'Dayan Almanot, the father of orphans and the judge of the widows. He takes care of the weaker layers of society. So Avraham says, if you don't have that, if you don't have Yirat Elohim, yes, you might care about the people of your city, but I'm a sojourner, I'm a visitor, and if you kill me and you take my wife, nobody will tell you that you did wrong, and that could happen. Eduardo, you had a comment?
Just a short comment here. I don't know if you know who is Dr. Siddhartha Ribeiro. He is a neuroscientist that wrote one book called The Night Oracle. And he evaluated the construction of the religion approach and through the biological approach. And he discovered, or better to say, he sustenta that the old religions were created by the dreams, and now people are much more secular because people don't sleep very well, and not for 10 or 12 hours. Yeah, because you need to pass for 3 different stages during the night to touch the alpha state.
Interesting.
And now for example, 400 years ago, here it's 9 p.m. Everybody in Brazil 400 years ago were sleeping. And now we will sleep midnight or something like that. And 7 o'clock we'll wake up to start Shaharit. So it's the end of the religion. Early.
That's interesting. Very interesting. I would like to read this book, but is it in Portuguese or? Okay,
yeah.
I'll have
this
to.
This guy is the head of the Genoma project in Brazil.
Okay. So, interesting. I want to show you a pasuk that supports. First of all, here it says that Hashem came to Avimelech b'halom alayla, but one pasuk, and then I have to go because I have a meeting. But in Eov, in the book of Job, it's chapter 4. No, maybe chapter 3. Let me see. He speaks about. Yeah, chapter 4. He says here in verse 12, now a word was secretly brought to me, and mine ear received a whisper thereof. In thoughts from the visions of the night, when deep sleep falleth on men, fear came upon me, and trembling all my bones were made to shake. Then a spirit passed before my face that made the hair of my flesh to stand up. It stood still, but I could not discern the appearance thereof. A form was before mine eyes. I heard a still voice, shall a mortal man be just before God? Shall a man be pure before his maker? So if you want to look it up, it's chapter 4 of Eov, from verse 12 on. And it really speaks about that like you said, that we need maybe those hours of dream, of sleep, for the mind to connect at that level. So we'll conclude here for today. I'll see you again at 7:45 for Minha, for Arvit.